I was very familiar with Atlantic Baptist College as I was growing up. The Woodstock Church was very involved with even the formation of ABC. Myron Brinton had been the pastor in Woodstock in the 1940s. I heard a lot about him because actually he had officiated at my parents' wedding, and he had gone to be the first principal. Stuart Murray came to Woodstock High School when I was in grade 12, brought a worship team to Interschool Christian Fellowship, and I had already been thinking that I'd probably be going to Atlantic Baptist College, but I think that visit solidified that decision and made me pretty sure that that's where I was going to go. So actually, I ended up not applying anywhere else. I applied to come to ABC and came to do 1 year of arts. That was really my plan from the beginning, that I would come and do a year of arts, then move on to another university. And so when I got to ABC, I had no idea what I wanted to do in life. So I took a year of arts, plus a course in homiletics. And in those arts courses, I think I learned ways in which it was important to integrate faith in a lot of different areas. Seems like a simple thing, but as classes began with prayer, it just sort of meant that I was thinking, well, how does English, how does sociology, how does philosophy, how does math, how do these things relate to my Christian life? And that was especially true with English literature. Peter Henderson was the professor, and as I really fell in love with literature, especially poetry, especially poetry of the Romantic period, I began to see ways in which English literature helped me to understand the human condition, to understand how spirituality really affects a lot of different areas of life. Another thing that was important during that year at ABC was my involvement in the chorale. Don Ramey was the director, and every second weekend we went to churches to sing, to give testimonies. Sometimes, or usually, a faculty member went with us. And I learned a lot about churches. I was very familiar with my own church in Woodstock growing up, but being part of the chorale meant that I was visiting a lot of churches around Atlantic Canada, seeing some churches that were growing, some churches that were dying, talking with people in those churches, talking with high school kids especially, or university-age kids, and learning from them. I guess I'd say what was working, what was not working in churches in terms of ways in which people's faith was growing or not growing. And I think that's helped me through my whole life, actually, as I've sought to be a pastor and then a professor at Acadia Divinity College, to understand how important it is that churches get things right in terms of how we make disciples, that all of that travel with the chorale really was helpful in my career. After my year at Atlantic Baptist College, it was very easy to move on to Acadia University. They had an agreement between ABC and Acadia. So I went and did an honors Bachelor of Arts degree in English. It was interesting because Peter Henderson had recommended one professor at Acadia to be my supervisor, to talk with him. So I went and met with him, and he showed a little interest in me even taking his courses or having me as a student that he would supervise, until I said to him that Peter Henderson had been my professor at ABC, and immediately he changed and said, oh, well, yes, if you've had Peter Henderson, then you should take this course and this course, and we should talk about what you might be interested in your thesis. And so suddenly he was willing to be my thesis supervisor. So that was a really important thing for me. When I finished at Acadia, I decided to take a year off. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, probably go back for a master's degree, maybe in English. And Jim Weber, who later became president of ABC, he was the pastor of the Woodstock Church. And when he knew that I was taking some time off after university, he recommended my name to two rural churches, Waterville and Victoria Corner. Their pastor had just resigned, and because I'd been a student pastor for a couple of summers, Jim Weber thought that I might do a good job to fill in for a while until they were able to call a pastor. I had no theological training whatsoever. I had one course in homiletics that I'd taken when I was at ABC from Rick Thomas, and other than that, I really had no training. But nevertheless, I believe that this is what God was calling me to do, so I ended up serving there for 8.5 years. It was an exciting time, a time of a lot of growth. I learned a lot. Those people were very gracious. But during those years, I began to see ways in which God could work in new ways. The churches grew. I baptized, I think, 50 people in those two little churches. After that, I decided, if I'm going to be in ministry, I think I would need some theological training. So I went to Gordon MacLeod Theological Seminary, did a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, and was the pastor at the Woodstock Baptist Church. Again, an amazing time because the people at Woodstock graciously allowed me to lead them through some huge changes. In fact, I would say they were excited to be part of the changes that we went through. And I recognized that society was changing and the churches needed to change, and that we needed to find new ways to reach out to people who were outside of the church. And so I learned a lot during that time. The church was part of many experiments, I guess, where we learned together how to do some new things. I look back to Alpha. That was one of the programs that began. I think we were about the third church in Canada to have an Alpha course. Again, it was exciting. We saw hundreds of people come to Alpha. We saw a lot of people become Christians. So again, exciting years in Woodstock. During my time in Woodstock, I was approached by a search committee from Main Street Baptist Church at St. John to see if I would meet with them to consider becoming their pastor. And I said very quickly, no. I had no interest in moving. And that led to a 2-year dance with those people where they told me they were convinced that I should move to St. John, that God was calling me to St. John, and I told them I was convinced that I was not called to go to St. John. But after 2 years, I came to the place and my wife agreed that actually we did need to move, that God had something new for us. Moved to St. John, the church really was dying, and the search committee knew that. I remember one of the things that convinced me to move was when I said to the search committee at the last meeting, and I'd met with them several times, I said, why do you think that I should come to St. John? And one of the search committee members said, well, we've met with other people. And you're the only person that we've met with that has said everything at your church needs to change. Was not doing well when I arrived. They had been in decline for a number of years. And so even more than in Woodstock, we made quite radical changes in how we did church. And so again, it was a learning experience for me and for the church, and God was good and God blessed. It was a stretch for me because I had to become familiar with ministries to the community that I'd never been part of before. We had to deal with a lot of people who were in poverty, people with mental illness issues, people who just were victims of a lot of difficulties. And so the Hope Mission began, which is now River Cross Mission, as a way to reach out to people with some of those needs, vulnerable people in our communities. And once again, we saw many of those people become followers of Jesus, and they're part of River Cross Church today. After 10 years, I became convinced that the church was doing fine, and it was time for me to prepare for a wider ministry. I was concerned that a lot of churches needed to understand the changes that would be needed, and that we needed leaders in churches who were well prepared. So I went back to university. I went to the University of New Brunswick, did a PhD in sociology that focused on why churches are in decline and what needs to change. I should say I also was pretty busy during that time looking at aspects of domestic violence and ways in which churches could make a difference in the lives of victims of domestic violence. As I graduated with my degree from the University of New Brunswick, I began serving at Acadia Divinity College, first as teaching in evangelism and mission, which has always been my passion as a pastor, because I think it's so important that we are effective in reaching out to our secular society. Then for 6 years, I served as the academic dean at Acadia Divinity College at a time when it was really important that we make pretty significant changes in our curriculum. And I mean curriculum in a big way, the whole way that we were training people so that our students would be well prepared for a different world as they became leaders in churches. And I look back with thankfulness for what I was able to do, the privilege that I've had to be a pastor and to serve at Acadia Divinity College. I retired at the end of December this year, so that was a big change. Family, having people into our home, enjoying my model railroad, which is a big part of my life. I'm part of a model railroad club in St. John, and even beyond that, I've been involved with people who are part of that hobby across Canada and beyond. I've been married to my wife, Rosalie, for almost 43 years. We have 2 children. Our daughter Nancy is married to Jason, and they have 1 son, Theo, who is our only grandchild, and they live quite near us. They live in Rothsay. Nancy works in the school system in St. John. She is a graduate of Crandall University with a Master's of Education degree, so that's a neat connection as well. Our son Kevin lives in Ottawa. He has a PhD from the University of British Columbia in linguistics, and so he has taught at the University of Ottawa in linguistics, and he's married to Ashley, and they have a dog, Newton. We have a wonderful family, and I'm very thankful for them.
Steve, I'm so very pleased to add my congratulations to those that you have received already and will receive probably later this evening. On achieving the recognition of the Distinguished Alumni Award. We appreciate all that you have done, the leadership that you provided, and the example that you've been throughout the years. We count you among one of the finest students who attended Atlantic Baptist College years ago. I was reflecting just the other day, Steve, on the first time we met. I think we were both students at Gordon Conwell, and you were knocking down those courses, trying to achieve that credential of Master of Arts. And I was thinking of how it's just been a blink of an eye, and recently you've achieved another recognition, and that is the recognition that entitles you to receive old age security. So congratulations on both of those and the many other things that have taken place in your life between those 2 things. You've been an exemplary pastor, a fine preacher, a great leader of people, a turnaround leader in congregational life, and others have looked to you for an example. You've achieved educationally, having gone on to earn a PhD after your Gordon Conwell graduation. And what I appreciate a lot about you, Steve, is your heart for Atlantic Canada and your dedication to raising up a new generation of leaders. So that final season of full-time ministry was spent at Acadia Divinity College, investing in students who would go out and serve in local churches and in other forms of ministry, hoping to make a difference. From your experience and from your study, you were able to invest in their lives. So thank you for that as well. We're excited for you and Rosalie as you enter this next stage of life. And though it may not be in a full-time paid capacity, we know that you will be involved in the lives of local churches and in the lives of individuals. So thank you for your service and congratulations tonight. We wish you all the best in this next stage of your life and your ministry.
As I think about my Christian faith, I think back to some significant times when I guess I've had to make some decisions about moving to the next stage. And I think my decision to come to ABC was one of those times. And I think that my time here made me think more deeply about my faith than I had thought before. When I think about the impact that Crandall's had on my life, I guess I think of a couple of things. One would be the way in which